Welcome back to Philosophy 15. I'm Scott Aikin.
And I'm Robert Talisse.
We left off last time with the too much democracy question, and we're going to pick it right back up. And we left off really with the thought that there are things more important than democracy. Being a non-anti-democratic thought, in fact, being in the service of democracy. And the question that kind of hung over this, and we touched briefly on it, is whether or not this thought has a one thought too many kind of problem, right? And so we analogized it to the hedonistic paradox. We analogized it to announcing that you want to make friends with somebody, and that looks like it's more alienating than like the plan that after you do this you'll be friends. All of these are things that, again, have kind of got the problem of it can't be something that has to be policy. That the pro-democratic thought can't be something that arises from the democracy in terms of it being the state. So, like, families have got this. But the second that you actually announce that you'd say, look, we're not going to talk politics at the table, say, for example, whether it be Thanksgiving or whether it just be Tuesday, it looks like if we announce this at the table, it looks like we have done something that you said, look, now are you silencing me? Are we, right? Like if we say, oh, something's more important than, there are things that are more important than politics. If you announce that at the dinner table, it looks like that's a kind of a silencing. Maybe my question here is, are there other civic virtues that can perform this duty without having to do the one thought too many? Are there ways to be able to say, so for example, whenever there's a political discussion, are there certain kinds of civic virtues where you could say, well, let's steer this discussion to something that's not going to be so alienating? Or are there, certainly we can do this with family, but are there civic virtues that you might say are politically averse?
I don't know.
Right, that's the problem.
It's hard to get your mind around exactly what's being called for. That addressing and formulating this problem and thinking of ways to resolve it looks like you're inevitably slipping on a cognitive banana peel.
That's right.
Right? I think part suggests that the problem is it suggests the depth of the problem.
Yes.
So let me say, maybe one place to start with is let's try to get clear on what a one thought too many problem is.
Good.
In the generic sense.
Good.
Right?
Okay.
So in the Bernard Williams case, right? Williams says, you're at a dock and two people fall overboard and you can only save one, and one of them is a stranger and the other one is your spouse. And Williams says, if you stand there and you try to figure out the reasons why, weigh the reasons for jumping in to save the one versus jumping in to save your spouse.
They are human beings, so they're equal.
That's right.
So,
if you say,
I'll save my spouse.
Yeah,
okay.
if you say, okay, but that she's my spouse gives me an additional set of reasons.
Right.
Williams says that's one thought too many.
Right.
It's not that it gets you to the wrong conclusion. It's that you had to traverse that sort of deliberative, that you had to engage in deliberation about whether the status of being your spouse gives you an additional reason, and weigh that against other reasons in play. That looks like it's a kind of deformity of the moral life.
Unhuman.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I think that the same thing occurs in the family case.
Yes.
When somebody says, it's my sister's birthday today, by the way. I've already wished her a happy birthday. But if somebody were to say, like, say my mother were to say, call your sister, it's her birthday, and then says, and it's your sister. That looks like a kind of one thought too many, right? Wait a minute, it's my sister's birthday should just be, that's okay. Oh, it's my sister's birthday, right? There's no real weighing of, her status as my sister has to sort of be figured into some kind of moral deliberation or calculation is the error. So to describe, to make explicit, let's put it this way, to make explicit that her status as my sister is the special reason-giving thing.
That should just be automatic or something like that.
That's the error, right? So it's got to be, to make it explicit is to make the mistake.
Right. And so this is the feature about all these organic relationships and this organic notion of culture that in some ways, in making it explicit, in some ways being reflective about it, this is in some ways a long-standing conservative concern with the politics of the Enlightenment. Right? Yep. The politics of the Enlightenment was supposed to be rationality, shining down and illuminating all of the things that were supposed to sort of keep us going and make us so that we had natural relations with each other and that we were able to regiment them when we reflected on them. The conservative concern was, and the conservative and the romantic concern with it was that no, the second that the light of reason shines on it, it withers and dies.
Yep.
Right?
This is Matthew Arnold's critique of Mill.
Yep.
Right? Right. So...
And there's something to that thought.
Absolutely.
Right?
So let me suggest that there's an analogy here that I think is an analogy where there is also a one thought too many problem looming, but we've largely, maybe not permanently, maybe not stably, at least to the extent that we'd like, I think we've navigated it. The religious toleration issue.
Great.
So here's a standard, toy kind of tolerationist thought that is available to religiously convicted citizens, right? Let's imagine that the citizens in question believe there's no salvation outside of their church. They believe that the most important thing for a human life to achieve is salvation. They believe, thirdly, that it is a moral duty of individuals to help others be saved, right? Maybe a very important duty of individuals to help others or to contribute to others' salvation. And yet they think some wall of separation thought between church and state. Yet they think that it would be wrong for the state to enforce, and not merely for the Lockean instrumental reasons, states aren't good at that or belief can't be coerced. Yeah. It's that there'd be something inappropriate about the state mandating even theologically proper worship.
Even if they were right.
Good. Now, that looks like an unhappy quartet, right? It looks like the fourth item in that doesn't seem to be a good fit with the others.
Right.
And what religionists say is salvation's just too important for politics. It's too important to leave to the push and pull of a human thing like the political world. It's salvation's too important to be put in the hands of the state. That is a one thought too many problem, right? It looks like one's looming. You're like, well, wait a minute. Like, what? That looks like you're not trusting the state, so that's not really it's too important. It's just you think the state's going to screw it up. Yeah. It's like you're supposed to be giving a principled version of this thought. It doesn't look like you can think the principled version of the thought in a self-possessed, reflective way. That once you start thinking the thought under the description of principled separation between church and state, you slip on the banana peel.
So I think that this is right. And notice, by the way, that this is not a problem that's intrinsic to the thought, right? You can have the thought, right? In some ways, this is a Hegelian kind of program where you'd say, look, whenever you're going through the phenomenology of spirit, you have spirit in all of its situated situations, right? And they all kind of hang together. But what tells the story of it all is the phenomenologist seeing it all and thinking those thoughts. Those are thoughts that the phenomenologist thinks, but spirit in its situated conditions couldn't think those thoughts, or else it ends up getting screwed up and it's in the wrong spot. And so in some ways this has kind of got like this, we've talked about the Owl of Minerva problem, which is it looks like we can only sort of recognize these sorts of things in hindsight, and once we're in that position, it's not just that the fix is in the past so you can't fix it, it's that once you've had the thought, you can't fix it.
And you've created with the Owl Minerva problem, once you've diagnosed the way in which the discourse is going wrong, you've contributed to creating the conditions for some new subversion.
That's exactly it. And if you said it out loud, now it's worse, right? Yeah, you say it out loud and now it's, right. So this is the reason why I asked the question about, like, instead of this being, because the way we've been doing this is that in fact we've kind of bit the apple of the Enlightenment, when we've been trying to theorize this, right? We bit the apple of the Enlightenment doing this, and that we're trying to have a theory about how to do this. Couldn't there be a kind of, again, one of these more organic kinds of programs? This is the reason why I was asking about, like, could there be a civic virtue? A civic virtue of just being able to sort of steer and maneuver and be able to sort of see these things and create spaces, not announce them, not say it's policy and not have like a study about it, but to just say something like, look, I'm, hey, cookies or something like that. I mean, is that what we're talking about? I mean,
yeah, like
is that a solution?
A kind of civic politeness that doesn't get practiced under that description. I mean,
right. It can't be reflective. It can't be something that you're going to say, because then it just becomes strategery or some strategic. Damn it. George W. Bush, you messed me up. Or that's SNL on George W. Bush. It's hard to tell the difference. But that's the, in some ways I think that's got to be the thing. But the problem with that virtue, as opposed to almost any of the other virtues, that's a virtue that the second that you recognize that you're deploying it well, it looks like you end up with the Owl of Minerva problem again. Right?
That seems right.
It looks like others could say that of you, but the second that you say, boy, I'm really good at making political discussions non-political so that I can make sure that people can have decent political discussions. Too late.
Yeah, the records, the needle scratched on the record.
Yeah, it's good.
And then it's all, it all falls apart. Again, I think that the difficulty of this predicament, the way in which we can't think our way exactly out of it, confirms the problem. It's not.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm in agreement with you there. So actually, let me try some pushback on this. Right. So one metaphilosophical view is that if you can state a philosophical problem in a way that just makes it strictly a kind of a verbal antinomy. Right? Where it's like we've in some ways defined our way into a kind of philosophical problem that's unsolvable, right? Why? Because of this sort of feature of the way that we've described it. Is there a sense in which, so if someone could say, look, could I re-describe the situation so that it's no longer a problem in the strict modal, in either of the strict modal senses? Is there a way that we'd be able to describe this problem in a way that doesn't yield this sort of antinomy that we've got? I think the pragmatist a pragmatist program might say, yeah, the problem has been thinking that the goods that we're talking about are ones that are themselves not products of political deliberation. So what creates the antinomy is the fact that we think that there are goods that we don't reflect on from the perspective of politics. But, I mean, again, even conservatives want to say, like, yeah, the whole reason why we have politics is that you see something is good and then you try to devise a political system to preserve them or to make it so that they're safe.
Right. But what we've seen, and this is a sort of pragmatist pushback then.
Yes.
What we've seen is that the more we are fixated in our social lives on getting democracy right,
yes,
the worse we get at it. That looks like a feature of the experience, right? That is that the more we're consumed with, like every interaction, every consumer choice, our luxury activities, how we spend our charity dollars, if that is all sort of in the service of the expression of a certain political profile or a certain set of political allegiances, the less able we are to recognize those who don't have those allegiances and don't share that profile, the less we're able to recognize those others as our fellow citizens. That's the tangle.
Right.
Philosophy15, folks.
Ending on a high note.
Don't know what we do from here.